Hey, and welcome to the Intact Beyond Transformation series. I'm Intact Beyond CEO Nathan Dale. Thanks very much for joining us. We're a collective of subject matter experts who are coming together to help support communities and employees as they make their way through this challenging time and thrive beyond. Our facilitator today is Nicole Watson, and our subject matter expert is Natasha Hawker. Natasha is the CEO of Employee Matters. She'll be focusing on areas around compliance, productivity, and safety while working from home. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks again for joining us, and I'll hand it over. Cheers.
My name's Nicole Watson, and I'll be facilitating today's deep dive with Natasha Hawker from Employee Matters. Natasha is here to talk to us about working from home successfully with compliance, productivity, and safety. Hi, Natasha. How are you?
I'm great, Nicole. Thanks so much for having me along today.
Thank you very much for being here. So look, I'd like to kick it off by asking you a question. I've put this out to a lot of our experts, and it's interesting to see different points of view. A lot of people have been forced to work from home at the moment, and I wondered, how has that affected you personally and your business?
Well, for us, and it's going to become more apparent as I go through our presentation, it is situation normal, because I actually started this business as a working from home business out of my bedroom. So my whole team and I have been a remote working team for now 8 years. So the main difference for us, Nicole, is that we are not necessarily visiting all of our clients, which is where we often spend a lot of our time. So working from home is very natural for us. The only difference is I have 3 children permanently here while I'm working from home.
We all have those disturbances and distractions, don't we? And I've had multiple issues with my Zoom and my volume and my microphone. And as we had a little laugh about earlier, you've obviously got some issues with your camera today. And I trust that you're, kind of suited and booted and ready to be shown, but just the technology was not on side today.
It was not working for us, but you can see my photo there, so everyone knows what I look like.
Fantastic. That's great.
So why don't I start by sharing my screen, and I have got a lot of fabulous content that I wanted to go through with everyone today. So welcome everyone. I am so pleased that you have decided to listen to this recording, but it's not a surprise to me given the circumstances that we all find ourselves in. I think it's really obvious that this webinar is needed, and it's why I chose to get involved with the Intact group. I know that there's been a brief introduction on me, but just super quick. I run an employee relations company, and I'm an employee expert. I specialize in helping medium businesses create exceptional business performance through their employees. Think employee relations, policies, recruitment, investigations, and exits. When it comes to corporates, we often work with them when they either have a lack of capacity or capability with their current workforce. So let's change tact. I think what we've experienced in the last few weeks is nothing like the vast majority of us have ever experienced in our lifetime. And the rapidly changing and evolving nature of this virus has left our communities and many of our businesses in disarray. We now, Nicole, have millions of people working from home with a clear direction from the government to do so. If you can work from home, you must work from home. So while many of us jumped on board with this direction, when we packed up our desks and we sent our teams home, we're now a few weeks in, and the dust has started to settle, and we really need to carefully consider what our risks are. There are some significant risks around this, and how we're going to do this in the longer term if this continues for a couple of weeks or a couple of months or even longer. Just because we can physically work from home now, how can we ensure that we're doing this compliantly with similar, or even better still, what I believe is possible, better or increased levels of productivity and safety? So that's what we're going to be chatting about today. So first of all, the very boring but very necessary part of the presentation, being that the advice I'm going to give today is general in nature, pertaining to the field of HR management. And the information in this presentation does not constitute specific legal or HR advice and should not be relied upon as such. Employee Matters is not a legal firm and does not purport to give legal advice. So let's move on. We've got that out of the way now.
Thank you.
Compliance. See, there's a good example of compliance, Nicole.
We're best safe than sorry.
Exactly. I learnt that lesson, but that's a story for over wine. Okay, so this is a quote that I came across in my preparation and reading for this presentation, which really resonated with me, and I'm sure it's going to resonate with a lot of you as well. It's along the lines of, we're being forced into the world's largest work from home experiment, and so far it hasn't been easy for a lot of people. And I would like to ponder how much of an experiment has this been. And this quote was from no one famous or anyone I even know. The quote is by Saikat Chatterjee, a Senior Director Advisor at Gartner, which is a research and advisory firm. But I think this is an exciting opportunity. I think particularly, Nicole, for women, a lot of them have been pushing flexibility and work from home, and there's been a lot of pushback on that. It won't work, it's everybody has to be in the office together. And I think what this will prove is it is possible and people can work from home. It's not for everyone, and it's not necessarily the way the world is going to be forever, but it's definitely going to be a possibility, and it will reshape how we work or how our workforce looks moving forward. So let's talk about compliance specifically. As a business, as I mentioned at the beginning, Employee Matters is 100% a remote business. Actually, not just during the COVID-19. I actually started, as I mentioned, Employee Matters out of my bedroom, which I don't recommend, just quietly. I have a team of 15 HR and recruitment experts, and they're spread across Australia and even one in New Zealand. So I have had a lot of experience in this area. And in fact, now I'm going to show my age. I actually started working from home regularly back in 2002 when I was working for a professional services firm in London. So it has been possible from a technology point of view for a long time, even though that was a dial-up and it was quite painful, but we felt very advanced when we were doing it. So what I've done is pull together my top 5 compliance tips. Number 1, make sure that you have a working from home policy. And this should have been done before you even consider having employees working remotely. So you need to have one of those policies in place, and make sure that your employees are very clear on their obligations, your requirements, and what reporting is required. So that's number 1. Number 2, every remote employee should have completed a working from home audit. What that is, we've heard stories of everything from people working in their garages to on their beds, in their cars. And some people need to go to their cars sometimes for some peace and quiet. But I actually have to share, last week I had to get into my car because it became a recording studio for me, because I was recording my podcast, HR Heroes, and I couldn't get the noise levels right and the quality. So I actually went, I kid you not, to a cemetery close by to get a nice quiet space, because there was a tree being cut down, to use my car as my office. So it's really imperative from that point of view that you know where and how your employees are working. Your employees' workplace has become an extension of your workplace, their homes, and their safety continues to be your responsibility. So it's really important that you have a thorough understanding of what their setup is and what the risks are associated with with every employee working from home that's in your team. Next, update your employee policies to reflect a remote workforce. So what I mean by that is, I'm going to touch on this in a little bit more detail in my next slide, but at a high level, it's about compliance, and it's something that you need to think about. Next one is know your obligations. Did you know that if you have employees, and this is going to shock some of the people listening, that if you have employees working from home at night flexibly, some may now require to be paid overtime allowances. So you need to know, I can see the surprise on your face, but it's absolutely true. What are the requirements under your modern award or EBA? Now that I've possibly panicked a couple of you, take a breath. You do have options here, but just make sure that you seek appropriate advice if this impacts you. And the other thing to be aware of here is that you may become liable for any additional expenses your employee incurs while they're working from home. So be very clear about your expectations here. If your employee, for example, normally receives an allowance such as a car or a travel allowance or parking, maybe consider switching this over on a temporary basis to cover the additional costs from working from home, and make sure that this agreement is in writing and make sure that they've signed it. Next one, make sure your employees know that this is only temporary. While some employees may be running back to the office when it reopens because they miss their coffee and their teammates, for others, working from home may have opened their eyes to a whole new way of life. No commute, work-life balance, less distractions, maybe a lunchtime walk, and that's no distractions, obviously, if you don't have kids at home. But what I also know is that for many parents who have become teachers overnight, they're incredibly stressed, seriously stressed. And you're going to need to take this into account, and know that they're trying to deal with that. Now, I digress. Make sure your employees know that this is a temporary arrangement, that as a business, you intend for employees to return to their normal contracted location of employment. When appropriate, government health advice allows this. Be very clear here, and I would strongly recommend you put it in writing. Then what we need to do lastly here on this slide is protect your employees. Promote an inclusive working from home culture. Make sure that you don't have mini teams or groups forming that are off doing their own thing and intentionally leaving some people out, or making them feel like they're not included. Remote working can cause employees to feel a little paranoid if they're being left out of emails or meetings or communications, and ensure you set really clear boundaries and quickly manage the situations where this is occurring. So that's compliance. Let's talk about this one. I think this one is a very significant risk. One issue, and I don't think people have considered this enough in our haste to get people working from home, and we obviously had no choice about that because COVID-19 just shut everything down overnight, is the consideration around issues of IP and confidentiality. So as a business owner or manager, what steps have you taken to protect IP and confidentiality of your business while your employees are at home? If so, do all your employees know your expectations? If you're a bit unsure what I mean here are a couple of possible scenarios for you to consider. So, conflict of interest. Say you have housemates or partners who work in a competitive industry. While we hope we can trust those we're closest to, we've effectively removed the invisible line of having our workplaces now collide. Kids repeating something they may have heard. I'm pretty sure most of our kids tell teachers and friends everything that goes on in our household. And currently there's a lot more going on in the house, and they're still virtually talking to their friends and their teachers. Here's another example. They're often FaceTiming, and they could inadvertently walk into a conversation, a business conversation, and mum and dad is in the background and has heard something that was confidential that they shouldn't have picked up on. Making sure, and I heard this the other day, I know who he works for, having outside phone calls with noisy neighbours overhearing. Remember, everybody's at home. You can't assume that your next door neighbour is out and about. Computer screens that might be visible through a window. Proper destruction of company hard copy documentation. It can't just be thrown out in your normal bin. And use of personal IT equipment. What sort of protection does your system have? Now, I'm no IT expert. There's a very good reason why I'm in HR. But I do know that people in the industry have some serious concerns here. Think about kids jumping on work IT equipment, which usually is not allowed. It's usually signed off. You've signed that won't be happening. And security of property and equipment. We have no control protecting against the theft or unauthorized access. So there's a lot of work to be done in this area and a lot of considerations for businesses. And I'm going to revert back to the point from my previous slide and strongly suggest you update your company policies to reflect a remote workplace. So that includes making sure you update your policies to make sure that you've clear around your expectations around confidentiality and IP while your employees are working from home. And remember that implementation is a big piece here. And to minimize your risk, I strongly suggest you update the policy and also do some training on it. Just as an aside, I think there's never been a better time to train up our workforce. While many of them are working from home, potentially not in their fully utilized hours as what they would normally be. So this allows your employees to carefully understand what constitutes confidentiality and IP and what your expectations and, more importantly, their obligations are.
Fantastic.
So let's talk about flexible working. I love these slides. Slinkies, they were called, weren't they?
Yes, I had one of those.
Yes, used to keep us entertained for hours. So the buzzword of years gone by has been flexible working. And while this may have included flexible start times and finish times, part-time or job sharing, or some working from home, but it was rare, I don't think any of us in our wildest dreams could have envisaged the situation we're currently in. And what I mean by that is a large number of the workforce is actually working from home. Children, distance learning, and our ability to hold any face-to-face meetings has completely disappeared. Instead, we're dealing with multiple people working from home. This could be in a house full of flatmates, partners, a family of 4, 5, 6, or even 7, all at home, all trying to work or learn at exactly the same time in many cases. Yes. And this is what we call a new level of flexible working. And let's face it, we all have to be incredibly flexible to deal with it. So let's talk about my 6 tips for next level flexible working. Number 1, set very clear expectations. It's even more important to set clear deliverables, deadlines, and KPIs, and encourage your team to self-report on this. This is not you. This is them coming back to you to say, Nicole, here's what I've done. This is what I've done in this space. Set up a working from home guideline for your employees, such as no calls between certain hours. Emails must be responded to within 12 hours. I think one of the challenges, and I am absolutely guilty of this, because I have a proper office on the other side of the garage in my home setup. And it's very easy to wander across the garage at the weekends and start at 6 o'clock in the morning. But I think we need to put boundaries around that because, otherwise, if people are receiving those emails at those weird times, they're going to think that they have to be on. That's your expectation. So set some boundaries there. Number 2, and I am a huge advocate of this, trust your employees. I know for many less traditional owners, this is a big challenge. My view is trust begets trust. The vast majority of your employees really want to do the right thing and they want to make this work. Number 3, focus on goals and not activity. I am all for this. Be very clear about what you're looking to achieve and allow your team to work out the best way to get there. Innovation, I strongly recommend, is likely to become a byproduct of doing things differently. I don't care how long my team work if they get the job done. Yeah. Think about it as output based.
And that's what's been crazy for such a long time. I mean, it is measured in the time served at a desk, and that, and often how long you've been with the business. It's not measured in output and what you've actually added in terms of value. And I think that whole mentality really needs to shift.
It does. And the reality is we are therefore encouraging presenteeism and inefficiency, because the view is, I have to be at my desk at 7:30 and I couldn't be possibly seen to be leaving till 6:30 at night because otherwise I'm not a team player, rather than I got through everything in a half day, therefore I can go home and spend it with my family and I've done great quality work. Number 4, and I think this is really an important one. Allow time for adjustment. For many employees, this is a massive change and there's going to be an adjustment phase. Be really patient and allow for this. Support your team for this change. So as I mentioned, we've been a business that's been doing this for ages, but a lot of the team that come to work for us are ex-corporates. So they're used to being much more structured. And it's a case of they work from home or the client site and I'm not checking in on them. So some of them embrace that straight away. Some of our team have had to take a little while to get used to that. They love it once they get used to it, but you have to allow for that adjustment. Number 5, children at home. Usually working from home policies do not permit working from home if the employee needs to supervise their children. There is a good reason for that. This rule may need to be relaxed in this environment. Think about the new guidelines which allow for more flexibility around this in terms of when your team meetings occur and when the work can get done. If your employees are really struggling working together, work together with them to work out what some solutions are. We're hearing about some of the things our clients are doing that is really great in this space, and get some advice if you need it. There's some really clever ways of working. Let's break the mold. And the other important one here is number 6, encourage self-care. While the topic is flexible working, what we truly need to be mindful of is that our employees are currently wearing multiple hats. They're mum, they're dad, they're a teacher, they're an executive vice president, or whatever their job title happens to be. And it's hard, really, really hard. There are only so many hours in the day. Really encourage your employees to look after themselves. Give them tips on self-care, exercise, sleep. You might even run a league table of how many kilometers people have walked in a week, and see, or walk together virtually and have a call, do a business meeting as you walk around the block. There's nothing stopping you.
Yeah, there's definitely something that I've been trying to do, is kind of make sure that I'm not sat there the whole day in front of a screen. And I've been making sure that when I have my team catch-ups in the morning, that I am walking around the block, or I am walking to get my coffee, or I'm walking somewhere, because that is one of the times, throughout the day where you can walk. It's an internal meeting. I don't need to share a screen. So it's quite easy for me to incorporate, that little piece, of the outdoors into my morning.
Well, the reality is that depression is a big risk here. And one of the best ways to manage people's mood is actually to get outdoors and walk for half an hour. So really important that people incorporate that. And I think the last thing here is that the point is that your employees are no good to anyone if they're trying to do too many things at once, or they're burning out. So, teach them self-care and some self-love.
Definitely. I listened to, I recorded Dr. Mark Williams, and he talks about, habits and patterns, and how, multitasking is not a thing. And I think I said to him, one of the key takeouts of that is I can go back to my partner who always says he can multitask, and I can say, look, you cannot multitask. It is not a real thing.
Yeah. Look, I think it used to be, people thought it was a thing, but the reality is I've done a lot of study on Kanban, which is like just a simple options doing done. And you can only ever have 3 things in your doing list at one time, no more. Otherwise it won't happen. And you cannot move anything else into your doing list until something's either gone back to options or over to done.
It's a really good idea.
It's brilliant. Love it. And it just downloads the idea. I can put as many Post-it notes on my Kanban slide as I need to. So it just gets it out of my head, which means I'm more focused for what I'm doing. Okay, let's talk about recruitment. While we see the media coverage of the unemployment devastation in this crisis, and you can see what problems that's caused, believe it or not, we are still getting recruitment requests from our clients whose businesses are still going full steam ahead, and some. There are some businesses out there that are having their best quarters ever. And they are looking to hire in this new world of remote working. So how do we do that? And let's talk about what I mean by new world first. Well, given we're all working remotely, there is no ability to face-to-face interview anymore. Presentations or site tours, whatever else required face-to-face interaction, that's not part of the recruitment process anymore. So you may need to hire someone without them having to have ever physically stepped foot in the office that they're going to eventually work in. And this not only makes for the decision maybe to be a bit harder for you as the employer, but it might even be harder to sell to the potential candidate what a great place to work is. And let me share an example here. In my old days, I was a recruitment consultant, and You never, ever, ever sent anyone to an interview sight unseen. And when I started my business, I started recruitment. And because I was a virtual business, I had to recruit without having met anyone. And I couldn't believe how successful it was and how easy it was to change. So I think a lot of things we can turn on their head. So let's talk about how businesses can do this. So you still need to set up a very structured interview process, similar to how you would do it from a face-to-face perspective. But think about how you're going to conduct the interviews, video conferencing. Now, whilst I have done so many video conferences, I've completely lost count. Again, way back a long time ago, which shows my age. Some people are not familiar with this and will find this form of interview extremely nerve-wracking. So you're going to have to allow for that, because they may not put on their best, most polished interview performance in this situation. So you may have to give and take there. Think about who's going to be involved. I would suggest, in addition to the necessary interview panel, that you might want to do a team meeting for the final candidate so that they get a chance to talk to the team and meet the team. Set up a presentation which talks to the normal workplace, maybe even show some photos of what the normal workplace looks like. Talk about the facilities you have. How's the office set up? What's the culture like? Remember, it's actually going to likely to be different now when everyone returns. So talk about what you're doing now versus what you do in the workplace. So you might have virtual Friday night drinks and actual Friday night drinks. So be very open about that. And I think it's really important that you're very open in an interview anyway, because you want somebody to come in and get a realistic expectation of what it's like. So a quick video with various employees who are talking about what it's like to work for company X now and the normal workplace is super easy to do. You can do it on an iPhone. You can do it on Zoom. Just get them to answer, hi, it's George from accounts. Why I like to work at ABC is this. This is what it's like from a cultural perspective. This is the place for you if ... And just have a couple of people across the business do that. And that will really start to give a look and feel for who the business is and what it's going to be like for that individual to work there. Use psychometric testing. This will give you an all-round view of candidate suitability. I like to run these prior to a second interview so that we can probe any areas that come up in that psychometric testing. We use one called Harrison's, which maps the individual to a job. So it says, is Natasha a fit to be a managing director of a company? Yes, she's an 80% fit, and here are all the traits that she has that is a fit for that. So that's a really powerful one. Yeah, I love it. I would strongly suggest you really prepare and discuss with the candidates what your plans are to onboard them. Remember, this is going to be a huge fear point for candidates who may not be able to understand how this can possibly work. Help alleviate their fears by being organised and upfront about what you plan. This is not the time to wing it. What I would share here is that your employees are at their greatest risk of resignation in the first 6 months that they join you. And the reason is that the onboarding or induction process is poor. So it's really important to get that right.
It's really interesting. I think this particular area, my background is actually recruitment, and everything that you're saying is kind of, going out throughout my journey of my career. Since I started, even with Intact, I've actually had day one working from home. I started just as this pandemic hit. So I've done all of my learning online, getting to know the systems. Obviously, I went through the interview process. And that's been successful because it has been so tight. We had to respond to this last minute. We had to pivot. It wasn't planned for me to start at home, but it's been a really interesting experience. And as I said, I'm lucky because Intact have done it so well. But it's hard because there is no rule book on this. There is not necessarily a rule book on what to do when all of a sudden people have to work from home and they haven't been able to go into the office and have that experience.
And I think you raise a really good point. The businesses that will succeed through this are one where they empower their employees to be the best they can be. The ones that are heavily dictators, that don't trust, that have to visibly look at everything, they are going to struggle and struggle big time in this new environment.
I agree, and take up a lot of their time as well, trying to monitor, somebody when they should give them that opportunity to prove it, because as I said, it's uncharted territory.
Which is a lovely segue into performance management. I think, one of the things we've discussed as a team is, a couple of weeks ago, it was all about, okay, we need to get everyone working from home, and we need policies, and we need working from home and audits. And then the next wave that's going to happen is that some people are going to thrive in this and some people are not. So how do you performance manage someone virtually when you can't actually see what they're doing day to day? Or, let's be fair, what they're coping with on a day-to-day basis, depending back on that trust thing, how much they share or how much they try and cope on their own.
Yes.
But I think this picture really captures how many of us feel about performance management. And let's throw another pain point onto an already painful process, being remote working. And how do you manage that performance remotely? So a couple of tips here. One, set some ground rules. Make a real point of familiarizing, setting up some ground rules and around working from home. Make sure that you remember that working from home is also new, probably for your manager as well as you. So having everyone across the same rules and guidelines will significantly help in this transition. I love this one. Number 2, communicate, and then communicate again. Yes. Communication is super important. Keep everyone up to date in a really dynamic environment. Ensure everybody understands the framework for working from home, and allow yourself to lead by example in setting the framework for how you want everyone else to act and behave. Counter any issue of work or social isolation. Communication suggestions for the audience are things like a daily or weekly update meeting or virtual huddles, a one-on-one meeting, maybe check in on people individually to ensure that they're okay, and whether they've got any work, family or productivity issues. The reality is here that the lines between work and family are completely blurred. There used to be a bit of that mentality in some corporates, sort your stuff out at home and get on with it. I don't want to see any of it here. And I think, the reality is it's all here now and playing out on a daily basis. Stay super close to your people and keep the lines of communication open. Support them and show extra care, compassion, and kindness. That's really important. Number 3, set expectations. My view is that it's even more important to set clear deliverables, deadlines, and KPIs, and self-report is really important. So get your team to send you a report at the end of the week, how they've assessed themselves against those KPIs. I'm a great believer in what doesn't get measured, doesn't get done. So having KPIs for all of your team is really important. So define what are the priorities, how are the tasks going to get done, how is your team going to track their projects that they're working on, how are they going to meet, and when are they going to meet to discuss this, what technology is going to be used, and will you do meetings at certain times to get everyone coordinated. I think you need to be really clear on what you're measuring and how you're measuring it, so inputs and outputs. And I think, have a look at what they need to do and then just break it down into chunks. I think it should be an ongoing conversation. Remember, going fully remote is an experience for many companies and their workers. So be really honest about what's working and what can't get done in these circumstances. So overall communication is absolutely key.
Definitely. And I think that goes both ways as well. I mean, everyone's situation is unique. And I mean, we laugh about, where we're working and, having to, do you go to your car, and my partner's currently working on the balcony because he's too loud on the phone. But, these are real issues for some people. And if, your job is to do creative writing and you've got your partner who works in sales and they are loud and they're on the phone and you can't get that quiet and you can't zone out, there might be something really simple that that you can do, like noise cancelling headphones. But if you don't communicate and you don't connect, it's never going to get solved.
You're absolutely right. And our team are experiencing this because they're used to working from home and they have everything set up and it's their domain. Now they have partners and husbands that are used to working in open plan offices and noisy, vibrant, sometimes communities. And some of our team are like, oh my God, I can't wait for him to go back to work. I just need a break. And I think it's a really valid point. You've put people into a very small space often where you've got two people. It doesn't take much for two people to be on the phone. And even when you're not listening to the conversation, it's distracting you. So there are some issues there. So communication is key. So number 4, focus on inputs, not outputs. So don't overdo it. Don't micromanage. In this environment, it's more around helping people with the inputs rather than just measuring the outputs. What can I do to help you do your best work? What do you need from me that's going to help you succeed? All of those types of questions. And get feedback, number 5, from internal and external clients. While you're not able to observe the person's performance physically, get some feedback from their internal and external clients, and I'm sure they'll give you a view of what's going on. Number 6, be flexible, but don't be afraid to address your concerns and do it early. This is one of my big bugbears. People do not address concerns early enough. And often people would say, if they had told me that there was a problem, I could have dealt with it, but nobody ever said anything. And I'm shocked I'm sitting here now in a performance management discussion because no one wanted to have that difficult conversation. So you've got to do it and do it early. But what I want to be really clear about here is whilst you need to be understanding and flexible as employers, that does not mean that you have to put up with underperformance or misconduct. Address it early. A simple conversation can often eliminate the issue very quickly rather than it growing into a big issue as we just discussed. Number 7, if you've had underperformers in the office, you've likely just moved the issue to a working from home underperformer. So just keep any conversations that were happening before the move to working from home going. So this means instead of a face-to-face performance management discussion, they should now be happening via video conferencing, and they should be happening as they would have normally happened. So there's no change there. It's just the channel for doing that is over Zoom or whatever product you're using. And the last one here is consistency is key. You must follow up regularly and consistently. There's no difference here to being in the office. Do not sit on a problem and let it fester. Get involved and get it fixed quickly.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more.
Let's talk about communication. I touched on it briefly in the previous slide, but I do want to dive a little deeper here. You as a manager or a supervisor have a duty of care to protect the health and well-being of your employees. You need to reassure your employees that you're taking the situation very seriously. There's a lot of stress out there, and communicate with them frequently. I actually think this needs to be daily, and you need to be communicating quickly as things evolve. It's, we're looking at job keepers for a number of clients at the moment, and the ATO site is being updated almost hourly. So, to stay across that information and become the one source of truth for your people so that they feel you've got it covered is really, really important. So I think you can't over communicate in this situation. We all need to play a part in keeping our teams calm and productive as they can be. And if you don't already have an employee assistance program, an EAP available to your employees, then I strongly, strongly suggest you look to implement one. This situation is causing enormous levels of anxiety, both here in Australia and globally. And this is one way you can help your employees.
Definitely. And I think that's a key issue, is that quite often people don't understand, what it is they're reading. There's so much conflicting information out of there that if you have someone who you can contact in your, in your business externally, or an extension of your business, who understands, exactly what's happening, what the legislation is, what we're able and not able to do at the moment, and can really communicate that to you. Because even across our business, our CEO, came out and produced a video that went out to all of our employees. And, what is JobKeeper? What does that mean for you and for us as a business? Because, you can spend hours trawling through the internet, trawling through different articles, and then probably you end up with so much conflicting information. You're no better off than when you started. So if you can get that clear, concise communication from your employer, which is a place that you can trust, then the anxiety and the stress that already is occurring in this uncharted territory, that is alleviated a little bit.
Yeah, we're working with some lawyers on JobKeeper, and they have 13 solicitors reviewing it every day to stay across it. So it's complex legislation. It's great legislation. I'm really pro JobKeeper, and it can be a game changer for business. But okay, let's talk about this. I think the other things that we need to think about is maybe pulling together a list of your employees who you may feel need additional support. So employees who are particularly panicked about the situation, where you might have some concerns around mental health. Any employees considered high risk, for example, they might have chronic health issues or age or family with health issues. Employees who you are aware they suffer from a mental health condition. Employees who are suffering or possibly suffering from financial stress or hardship. For example, if you had a person in your team and one of them works in travel, they lost their job weeks ago, and have no sort of sense of when that's going to come back. The other one would be employees who have been asked to work from home who's struggling, for example, parents with children off school, employees that live alone. This is a really important one. Those employees that are on their own used to get all their social interactions from work and sport after work or drinks after work or hobbies after work. They've got none of that anymore. And it could be incredibly lonely for them at the moment. So stay very close to those groups. You might want to do check-in calls with them every couple of days and just support them more closely. I think is really important. So I also encourage you to engage your workforce, give them a sense of togetherness. Here's a statistic that might shock some of your listeners. It's really important that you continue to build an engaged and supportive workforce. To have a disengaged or not engaged employee costs 34% of their salary. 34%. It's really expensive. So you might do daily stand-ups on Zoom. You might do that at the beginning of the day, set the scene of what's happening, and then recap at the end of the day. We use a tool called 6Qs, which is a great way to measure your team's engagement. And you might want to do some online training so people feel that they're being invested in throughout this process. Also look for your opportunities for your team to still socialize. Our team had virtual drinks on Friday night. It was great. It was not compulsory. It was bring your wine, whatever you want. And we did not talk about work at all. It was just as if we were at the pub, probably better than if we were at the pub. We'd probably more be inclined to talk about work. Eat a virtual lunch together. You might do lunchtime quizzes. You might do a tour of the workspace. So you might do a little area of, here's my home setup. This is what I'm prepared. You don't have to. That some people may not want to show that, but maybe consider doing some virtual team building activities. We've come across a product called Banana Float, which is like a pub quiz. And you can do charades and karaoke and Pictionary. And that's a great way for teams to come together, bond, and interact in our virtual world.
That'd be great for onboarding as well.
Oh, exactly. Get to know. Well, often when you started in a role like you have, Nicole, you usually get to start with one or two other people that become your new hire buddies, where you check in with each other and you develop a relationship. And that's harder virtually. When you sat in a room all day for a couple of days doing orientation, you sort of get to know each other a lot faster than what you would in the current circumstances. So stay close to your people. It's a hard time. It's a hard time for you. It's a hard time for me. It's a hard time for everybody in our communities. Keep the lines of communication open, support them, show care, kindness, and compassion. And let's all work together to navigate this crazy world that we are living in. So that brings me to the end. One last thing I would want to leave you with is I believe that secret to building exceptional businesses is your team. I believe that your employees are your greatest asset and also potentially your greatest liability if you don't do the right thing, and should be treated as such. And remember, a pandemic does not alleviate you from your employer obligations. Their work will be even tougher on you. They are already getting slammed with people making complaints about various things. Do reach out and connect with me on either LinkedIn or Facebook, and let me know that we virtually met through Intact, so I know that that's where you heard about us. I'm Natasha Hawker, and remember, your employees really do matter.
Thank you very much, Natasha. That was fantastic. And as I said, my background is also recruitment, HR employee experience. So a lot of your presentation, it really does resonate with me. And when I think about, the conversations that I've had with clients, particularly in the construction and property industry, talking about, using flexibility to attract women to their business, being flexible with some of their policies. I really did think about it when this first happened. They must be a little bit behind the times, as would a lot of other industries. And then there'll be other areas, that will have really pivoted in this situation, like, businesses like yourself who, have been kind of a bit more used to the work from home phenomenon and have been used to this change. So I think it's really, really interesting. And some key takeouts for me is definitely, we need to communicate, we need to reach out, more than ever, particularly if you've got new starters. People can be in very unique situations. We've got an expert who's coming on to talk about mental health, Brad McEwen from Beyond Blue, and we've also got a lady who is coming on board to talk about a new project that she's been working on that helps you check in on people at home who might be in high risk domestic violence situations. So there's a few points, there that really lead on nicely to the rest of the series. But I mean, thank you so much for your support, Natasha. And I mean, look, how do you see like the working community transforming beyond today?
I see it as a hugely exciting opportunity. And let me be really clear. I think that this, whilst it's very tough, there is going to be some incredible wins out of this. For those of you who are looking to recruit, maybe not right now, but tell you what, right now is a great time to be picking up some incredible talent that is available in the marketplace at the moment. So try and be a little bit more strategic. I think often in business, we're a little bit focused on the today and not focused on what we're trying to achieve in 18 months, 3 years, 5 years. And I think that's very apparent when we think about how many people or how many businesses do not have a strategic plan and do not have a people plan that underpins that. I am hopeful that one of the things that comes out of this crisis is, one, more planning, more BCP planning, business continuity planning, more crisis management, and that we are a little bit more flexible and we don't get so set in our ways. I think, the only constant is change, and what we've just done is increase that step change dramatically. And those businesses that don't embrace that will get left behind.
I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much for your time and supporting, the working community. On behalf of Intact Beyond, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.